A pale dawn light touched the horizon of the small human settlement. The wooden walls and low houses lay quiet. The settlers slept after a long harvest season that yielded little food. Hunger weighed on every heart. John, the settlement leader, stood on the gate wall. He wore simple clothes and carried a worn leather satchel. He looked out toward the dusty road that led through the barren fields. In his mind, he counted the food rations left in the storeroom. The numbers were low. Near the road, 2 figures appeared. One was a tall woman with pale gray skin and large, shimmering green eyes. She wore a tattered cloak that wrapped around her slender frame. Beside her walked a small child, no older than 6. The child held her mother's hand tightly. John raised a hand to call out, but his voice stuck in his throat. Humans rarely saw aliens, and he had never seen one so close. He climbed down and walked toward them. The ground crunched under his boots. When he was near, the woman dropped to her knees. Her child stayed back, clutching the cloak. The mother's eyes shone with worry. She spoke in a quiet voice that no one understood. John motioned for her to rise. He spoke slowly. "I do not know your language," he said. "How did you come here?" The woman reached into her cloak and pulled out a small device. It glowed with soft blue light. She pressed a button. The device beeped and spoke in John's tongue. "Please help me," it said. "My child is hungry. I have no food. I will work free if you feed me and my child." John's heart tightened. He felt pity for the mother and child. Yet he heard the words of his own thoughts. "There is little food left. Can we spare any?" He looked around the quiet settlement. No one followed him from the wall. Everyone still slept. He pointed to a narrow road leading inside. Then he made a motion of eating and fed his fingers to his mouth. He hoped she would. "Understand," the device repeated. "Work free if you feed us." John nodded. The woman stood and bowed her head. The child, a small girl with white hair and bright blue eyes, stepped forward. She took John's hand. John felt the child's tiny fingers grip his. She looked up at him with hope and fear. John led them into the settlement. The wooden gate creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the homes stood close together. Smoke rose from chimneys. A few early risers moved about, tending fires in front of their doors. John called to them, his voice carried in the still air. "Wake up, we have visitors." People emerged from their homes. Luke, a strong farmer, rubbed sleep from his eyes. Emma, a baker's wife, carried a little bucket of water. Alex, the head farmer, tightened the straps of his work belt. They saw the alien woman and child. Some stepped back in fear. Others looked curious. A few frowned. Emma took a step forward. She held out the bucket. "Water first," she said. "You look thirsty." The woman's green eyes shone. She moved closer and cupped her hand. The water looked strange on her skin, like dew on a leaf. She drank slowly, careful not to spill. The child drank too, her small mouth wet. Emma nodded. She turned to John. "Food next?" she asked. John nodded. He turned and walked toward the communal storeroom. The other settlers followed. Inside, old wooden shelves held sacks of grain, dried meat, and hard bread. The air smelled of dust and salt. John looked at the stores. He knew every sack by heart. He reached for a small sack of grain. He tied it closed and carried it out. Emma opened the grain sack and poured some into 2 bowls. Luke fetched water from a well. They set the bowls on a low table in the open air. The woman and child knelt before the table. The wind stirred the woman's cloak. She reached out and took a bowl of grain. She looked at John. The device clicked and spoke again. "Thank you." John bowed his head. "Eat," he said. The child tasted first. Her eyes lit up at the simple flavor. She smiled and began to eat. The mother ate more slowly, her cheeks hollow from days without a meal. The settlers watched. Some felt sorrow. Some felt fear. Alex, the head farmer, crossed his arms. He studied the alien. She wore simple clothes, no weapons. Her eyes looked tired. He wondered what danger she and her child might bring. After they ate, the woman placed a hand on the child's shoulder. The child looked at the settlers and said a soft word. The device repeated, "Thank you." Again, John spoke to the woman. "We have work you can do," he said. Fields need tending. He pointed to the dry land outside the walls. The woman nodded and stood. She touched the device, which hummed. Then she stepped forward and bowed. She said, I will work free. Jean turned to the farmers. Help her learn, he said. We cannot refuse the hungry. Luke offered a hand to the woman. Come with me, he said. I will show you. The woman took Luke's hand. The child held the device and followed. The settlers watched as they walked past the gate and into the fields. As dawn fully broke, the fields lay quiet behind them. The air shimmered with dust. Hope stirred in John's heart. Perhaps helping the alien woman would save them all. Perhaps kindness would bring them more than they could give. In the silent hours before work, the settlement felt a change. Fear lingered, but so did hope. The woman called Ilara and her child called Lyra would work for their keep, and the humans would watch and wait to see if this choice would bring life or danger. The sun rose higher in the pale sky. The air felt warm over the dry fields. Ilara and her child, Lyra, walked beside Luke toward the rows of dying crops. Luke carried a simple hoe and wore a wide straw hat. Ilara carried only a clay water jug, strapped to her back. Lyra held the small translating device close to her chest. Luke motioned to the brown earth. He pointed and spoke, Start here. The words came slowly, but Ilara understood. She nodded and knelt, her gray skin blended with the dust. She pressed her fingers into the soil. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Lyra sat on a small rock beside her mother. She watched the other farmers busy in their tasks. Some planted new seeds, some cleared rocks from the ground. A few poured water carefully from leather skins. Emma walked by with a basket of fresh bread. When she saw Ilara, she stopped. She offered a loaf. Eat before work, she said. Ilara smiled and held out her hand. She accepted the bread. The crust was warm and soft. She broke it in half and gave a piece to Lyra. The child's small mouth opened wide at the first taste of warm bread. Emma stayed a moment and watched Ilara. She said, You have work, but eat too. Ilara bowed her head and spoke through the device. Thank you, I am grateful. The device repeated. Emma nodded and walked on. Luke shook his head. They will help. But some are uneasy, he said. We have never had an alien worker. Ilara looked at Luke. She felt his worry. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. She said quietly, I only want to help. The device translated, I only want to help. Luke did not smile, but he stopped talking. Instead, he showed her how to use the hoe. He waved his tool and said, Lift and turn. Ilara watched and copied him. She moved with slow care. Her movements were different from the humans, but they were smooth and strong. As the day passed, more settlers gathered to watch. Alex, the head farmer, came with 2 other men. They stood on the hill near the fence. Alex folded his arms. He wore sturdy boots and a leather vest. His hair was dark and cropped short. He watched Ilara's work. Alex spoke to the other farmers. Look at her. She works faster than us in this dry soil. His tone was flat. The others mumbled. Some nodded. One man said, She must be from a wet world. She is strange. But she can help. Another shook his head. Maybe spy. Alex held up a hand. We watch, but we give her a chance. Ilara finished one row. She stood and wiped dust from her brow. Lyra jumped to her feet and ran to her. She held out a small bundle of broken rocks. She said a word. The device clicked and spoke. I found stones. We can fill holes. She smiled, proud of her find. Lar took the stones. She placed them in the holes along the row. Luke saw her work and nodded. He said to her, Good, you help much. The device spoke, I help. I want to help. Ilara looked at Lyra and then at Luke. She said softly, We belong here soon. The device repeated. By midday, the sun burned hot. The settlers gathered water to cool off. Ilara emptied her jug into 2 wooden bowls. She offered one to Luke. He took it gratefully and drank. He handed it to Ilara. She sipped slowly and handed it to Lyra. The child drank eagerly. Emma arrived again, this time with a pot of stew. The smell was rich and warm. She set the pot on a flat stone. She ladled stew into bowls for Ilara and Lyra. Luke and a young farmer named Sarah also joined them. They ate together in silence, listening to the wind. Sarah broke the silence. "Your world. Is it hot like this?" she asked. Ilara's eyes shone. She pressed the recording button. The device translated, "My home is cooler. We have many lakes and trees. Here it is dry." She looked at the cracked earth. "I want to help make it green again." Emma smiled. "We try, but rain is rare." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We appreciate you." Lyra finished her stew and patted her small belly. She pointed to the field and said, "Work," the device spoke. "We must work." The women stood. Ilara and Lyra picked up their tools. Ilara held the hoe and the stones. Lyra carried a small basket of seeds that Luke had given her. She scattered them in neat lines as Ilara turned the soil. While they worked, a group of skeptical farmers led by Mark watched from the fence. Mark wore a serious look. He whispered to two men. They nodded. Mark said, "I do not trust her." "She may signal others," one man said. "She seems gentle." Mark shook his head. "We stay alert." The day wore on. Ilara and Lyra worked side by side. They spoke softly. Ilara told her daughter about the farming techniques of her home world. The device translated. Lyra listened with wide eyes. When the sun lowered, the settlers returned to the gate to see them off. John climbed the gate wall. He watched Ilara's back as she and Lyra walked away with Luke and Sarah. John thought about the day. Ilara had worked hard. She had fed her child. She had shown care for the farm. Some settlers had shown kindness. Some had shown fear, but hope grew in John's heart. If Ilara and Lyra could teach the fields to grow, then the settlement might live. If they could win trust, then fear would fade. In the fading light, the fields glowed gold. Ilara knelt one last time and touched the soil. She felt the warmth of the earth. She closed her eyes and whispered to her daughter. The device repeated, "We may find a home here." Lyra smiled and slipped her hand into her mother's. As night fell, the field lay quiet. The stars shone overhead. Ilara and Lyra walked back toward the settlement with their new friends. Together they carried hope in their steps. A low wind blew across the fields as dawn broke. John watched from the gate wall. Clouds of dust moved on the horizon. The color of the sky turned orange and brown. The settlers felt a chill of worry. "Storm," Luke said, pointing to the distant haze. He stood beside Emma and Sarah. "We must secure tools and animals." John nodded. He climbed down and called out, "Everyone, prepare for a dust storm." His voice sounded urgent. He handed his satchel to a young man named Eric and ran toward the tool shed. Inside the shed, wooden racks held hoes, shovels, and rakes. John grabbed several ropes and tied the shed door. He carried extra ropes outside. He passed Emma, who held a plank of wood. She helped nail it over a window near the field. Ilara held Lyra's hand. The child's small face looked pale. The wind grew stronger. Dust swept across the ground in swirling clouds. It hit Ilara's cloak and stirred the folds. Lyra tugged at her mother's sleeve. "I am scared," she said. Her voice was small. The device translated, "I am scared." Ilara knelt and looked at her daughter. She pulled a piece of cloth from her cloak and wrapped it around Lyra's mouth. She wrapped another cloth around her own face. She then tied Lyra's hand to secure the small device around her neck. She stood and turned to the settlement. The walls wavered in the dust. She said through the device, "Stay close, hold my hand." John, Luke, and Sarah saw her concern. Luke ran to her side. "We help," he said. The device spoke. "Thank you, we help each other." The storm hit with full force. The wind roared. Dust filled the air like a river of sand. The settlers who were outside covered their faces and ran to the walls. Some stumbled in the thick dust. Inside the wall, people gathered near the gate. They struggled to breathe. Emma pressed the cloth to her face. She called, "Water! Someone bring water." Olivia, a baker, ran with a leather skin. She passed small bowls to trapped settlers. The water tasted gritty but was still life. John saw Ilara standing at the gate with Lyra and Luke. Dust whipped around them. Ilara knelt and touched the ground. She said a word to the soil. The device translated, "Hold on." She pressed her palm into the earth. It glowed faintly green for a moment. John blinked. Was it his eyes playing tricks? He saw plants around Ilara's palm. Bright green shoots rose through the dust. They clung to the soil, holding it down. Small roots reached into the ground. "What is this?" John asked. Alex, the head farmer, arrived. Beside him, he shielded his eyes. "We watch her." Alex saw more shoots pop up in other spots. The dust lost some strength near the new plants. Small patches of soil stayed in place. Elara stood and moved across the field. At each step, more shoots grew. The plant life held the ground. The dust storm's fury dropped around her path. In the settlement, the storm still rattled gates and walls, but the dust did not break in. The green barrier held the walls firm. Luke ran to Ilara. He spoke to her. "How do you do this?" The device translated his words. Ilara pressed a hand to the device and spoke. "My home world used plants to hold land. I learned their secret. I only share to help." The device repeated. Lyra held the device close. She said softly, "I'm proud." The device translated, "I am proud." John climbed down and approached. Dust clung to his hair and clothes. He held out his hand. "Thank you," he said. The device translated. Elara shook her head. She said, "Thanks to all of you. We saved life." The device repeated. The storm passed as quickly as it had come. The wind dropped. The dust slowed and fell. The sun shone through the thinning haze. The settlers stepped outside the gate. They saw the green shoots covering the field. Small leaves trembled in the breeze. The field looked alive. The soil did not crack when they stepped on it. Alex walked into the field. He touched a leaf. He tasted the dust on his finger. He frowned. It did not taste bitter. It tasted fresh. He looked at Ilara and bowed his head. "This gift—" "You saved us," Alex said. The device spoke. "I only gave what I could." Ilara's green eyes shone with relief. A cheer rose from the settlers. Luke let out a loud yell. Sarah clapped her hands. Emma hugged Olivia. John smiled widely. Lyra ran ahead and picked a small leaf. She smelled it. It smelled sweet and moist. She ate it. She laughed and ran back to her mother. Eric, the messenger boy, arrived on his horse. He carried the device charger and tools. He saw the field and stared. He rode closer. "This is miracle," Eric said to John. John nodded. "Perhaps kindness and nature will feed us now?" John turned to the settlers. "We have work, but tonight we celebrate." He raised his hands. The settlers cheered again. They helped each other clean tools and gather the new plants. Emma collected leaves and set them to test for food. Sarah and Olivia carried water to the field. As night fell, torches lit the gate. The settlement built a long table outside. Food rations were shared. Bread was mixed with new green leaves. Stew bubbled in a large pot. John sat beside Ilara and Lyra. He raised a bowl. To Ilara and Lyra, to Hope. The settlers raised their bowls. The fire crackled. Elara placed her bowl on the table. She said softly, "Home, we may have found it," the device translated. Lyra smiled and leaned against her mother. John looked at the sky. Stars shone bright above. He felt a warm peace. He spoke to Ilara. "Tomorrow we learn more. We grow together." The device clicked. "We grow together." Under the torchlight, the settlers laughed and shared. Ilara watched the humans with gratitude. Lyra fell asleep on a bench. Emma covered her with a soft cloth. In that moment, the settlement felt united. An alien mother and child had saved them from hunger and storm. In return, the humans had fed them and given them work. John whispered to Ilara, "You are part of us now." She looked at him. Her eyes glowed. She touched his hand. The device repeated, "We are one family now." The villagers heard and nodded. The night grew still. The fire died down. The torches glowed faint. Ilara and Lyra were escorted to a small room near the storeroom. It had a bed and a blanket. It was simple but warm. Before sleep came, Ilara held Lyra's hand and spoke softly, "We will face tomorrow together." Lyra nodded and smiled in sleep. Ilara closed her eyes and rested. Outside, John stood guard at the gate. He looked up at the stars. He whispered a promise. "We will protect you." The night wind answered with a soft sigh. And in the quiet before dawn, the settlement dreamed of green fields, full stomachs, and a new family bound by trust and hope. The morning sun rose over the settlement, casting long shadows across the glowing fields. The green shoots grew overnight into young plants with soft leaves. Settlers gathered at the gate to see the new growth. Their eyes shone with hope. John met Ilara and Lyra at the gate. He smiled and offered a warm bowl of porridge. The steam rose in the cool air. Ilara took a bowl and offered one to Lyra. The child held her mother's hand and ate slowly. Emma approached with a small sack. She opened it and showed seeds of wheat and beans. "We saved seeds from last year," she said. "We can plant more." The device translated Ilara's words. "We plant more. We grow food together." Alex joined them. He pointed to the fields. "We need strong hands today." "The plants need space to grow?" He smiled at Ilara. She nodded and stood. Lyra skipped ahead toward the fields. She scattered beans in neat lines between the young plants. Ilara followed, pulling small weeds by hand. The weeds came up easily between her pale fingers. Luke worked beside them. He dug small holes for the wheat seeds. He placed one seed in each hole and covered it with soil. He said, "My world has fields too. My father taught me this work." He looked at Ilara. "I am glad you know these things." Ilara pressed a hand to his arm. The device repeated, "I share what I have. Thank you for trusting me." Luke nodded. As they worked, Sarah brought watering skins. She poured water gently over the rows. The ground drank the water and settled around the seeds. The sun felt warm on their backs. In the village center, Emma baked bread again. She mixed flour with water and kneaded the dough. She set loaves in the oven and called to Olivia, "Help me with more dough." They worked together, chatting softly, their fear of the alien woman fading. Eric rode into the village on his horse. He carried news from other settlements. He jumped down and ran toward John. "Hostile raiders near the eastern pass," he said. "They attacked a mining camp. They took food and supplies." Eric's voice shook. John single quotes. Face grew serious. He turned to Ilara. "We must prepare defenses." The device translated, "We will protect each other." Ilara's eyes showed concern. Alex blew a horn. Its sound cut through the quiet. Settlers gathered. Around him at the gate, he spoke firmly. "We have little weapons. Our tools can defend us. We build barriers." He pointed to wooden stakes and thick vines near the walls. Under Alex's orders, humans and Ilara and Lyra worked together. They placed stakes 6 feet apart around the settlement. They wove vines and rope between them, creating a low wall. Ilara used her strength to pull thick vines, tying them to the stakes. Lyra carried small rocks and piled them at each stake. She worked with Sarah and a boy named Tom. Tom smiled at Lyra and said, "Good work." Lyra beamed as the device translated. As afternoon came, dark shapes appeared on the horizon. The raiders were close. John climbed the gate wall. He watched their banners, black flags with a red skull. The settlers prepared. They held tools, torches, and crude spears. Alex stood beside Ilara. He held a torch. "We fight here," he said. Ilara nodded. The device translated, "I will stand with you." Her hand rested on her side where she carried a small alien blade at her belt. The raiders charged. Their horses galloped. They shouted war cries. The settlement's bells rang. Elar stepped forward. She lifted her blade. She called to the raiders, in her own tongue. No one understood her words, but her voice was strong. She ran toward the first line of raiders and struck a vine barrier with her blade. The vines cut through ropes like paper. John and Luke ran to her side. They swung hoes at the raiders' legs. The tools caught armor and broke. Raiders fell from their horses. Tom threw a rock and hit a rider. Lyra stood behind a stake with Sarah. She held the translating device. She pressed the button and spoke. "They come," the device spoke. "They come." Alex lit torches. He swung them at approaching raiders. The fire spread on a raider's cloak. Another raider raised his sword and struck at Ilara. She blocked with her blade and pushed him back with surprising strength. The battle raged. Dust rose as raiders and settlers clashed. The green fields swayed in the wind. Ilara fought calmly, every movement precise. She disarmed one raider then. Another. John called out orders. He pointed to a gap in the barrier. He said, "Push them back there." The settlers moved together. They forced raiders into a narrow section. Horses slipped in the loose dust. Eric rode forward with a bow and arrow. He fired at raiders on horseback. His arrows struck shields and steeds. The raiders turned and tried to flee. With a final yell, Ilara charged forward. She swung her blade in a wide arc. Raiders fell back. Luke and John ran beside her, cutting vines and pushing raiders through the gap. The raiders, overwhelmed, turned their horses and ran. They vanished toward the eastern pass. The settlement stood silent, heavy breathing, and the clank of tools on armor. Alex lowered his torch. He looked at Ilara and Lyra. He said, "You saved us again." The device translated. "We fight as one." Ilara rested her blade at her side. The settlers cheered. They lowered their tools and hugged each other. Tom ran to Lyra and lifted her. He spun her in the air. She laughed and grabbed him back. John climbed down and greeted Eric. "You rode far." "Rest now?" Eric nodded and drank water. Emma brought fresh bread and stew. She set bowls on a flat stone. She said, "Eat and rest." Ilara and Lyra ate with the settlers. The fire burned low as night fell. John sat beside Ilara. He touched her arm. "We owe our lives to you. Thank you." The device clicked. "We are family now." Ilara smiled at him. Hat under Cal's soft song. The settlers cleaned the fields and repaired the vine barrier. They worked together in quiet peace. Lyra helped by handing ropes and stones. Alex approached John. He said, "We must plant more. Winter comes. We need food for all." John nodded and looked at Ilara. "Will you teach us more?" He asked. Elara single quotes s green eyes shone with hope. She reached to the device and spoke, "Yes, I will share all I know. We will grow strong." The device repeated. Under the moonlight, the settlement lay safe. An alien mother and child had become heroes. Humans and alien worked side by side, bound by kindness, trust, and hope. Their future looked bright after the long winter. A week passed since the storm. The fields grew green under the sun. Settlers worked early and late, planting more seeds. Ilara taught them to spread water evenly and to care for young plants. Lyra helped by carrying small baskets of seedlings. One morning, Eric rode back from a nearby ridge. He looked tired. He spoke to John. "I saw smoke in the north." "Maybe travelers or raiders," the device translated. "We must check." John frowned. John gathered a small group: Alex, Luke, Sarah, and Ilara. They mounted horses and followed Eric's path. Lyra stayed behind with Emma to help in the kitchen. She waved goodbye with a small smile. The ride was rough. The path led through rocky land and low hills. Dust rose under the horse hooves. Ilara held her cloak tight. She felt the wind and listened to bird calls. A hilltop, they saw smoke rising from a camp. The smoke was thin and gray. It rose in a straight line. John held up a hand. "Camp ahead, stay ready." The device translated. "Be careful." Ilara nodded. They crept closer. The camp had simple tents and a fire pit. Humans from another settlement sat around the fire. They looked tired and hungry. Some had scars on their arms. They looked at the riders with hope and fear. Dalek spoke to their leader, a tall man named Ben. Ben wore patched clothes. He bowed his head. "We ran from raiders. They burned our home. We have no food." His voice cracked. Elar stepped forward. She said through the device, "We feed you. We help you plant again. Come with us," the device repeated. Ben's eyes widened. He looked at his people. Some wept. He said, "We will follow you." "Thank you," the device spoke. "You are safe now." John Smiled, he dismounted and hugged Ben. He said, "Ride back. We have food and shelter." He looked at Alara. "Thank you." The device clicked. "I only share kindness." They helped pack camp. Settlers loaded grain sacks and tools into carts. Ilara and Sarah tended to the tired travelers. They gave water and bread. Lyra handed water bowls to the children. As they rode back, the sun sank low. The fields glowed gold. The travelers marveled at the green land. One woman named Kate said, "We have hope again." Ilara bowed and spoke, "Together we will grow." The device repeated. They arrived at the settlement at dusk. Torches lit the gate path. Settlers gathered to greet the travelers. Emma set tables with stew, bread, and fresh greens. Laughter and chatter filled the air. Ben's group sat at the table. They ate with hunger and joy. Children ran around playing near the young plants. The settlers showed them where to sleep and gave them blankets. John walked with Ilara to the storage room. He opened the door. Inside, sacks of grain and fresh vegetables lined the walls. He closed the door and leaned on it. "We have enough for many now," he said softly. Ela smiled. The device spoke. "The land gives enough when we care." She looked at the sacks and then at John. She said, "Thank you for trusting me." John nodded. The next days were busy. Travelers and settlers worked side by side. They built new homes and planted more fields. Ilara showed them how to place seeds and how to water the ground at dawn. Lyra wandered the fields, stopping to touch leaves and smell flowers. She sang simple songs to the plants. The device translated her songs. "Grow strong. Grow tall. Feed us all." One evening, Alex called a meeting at the gate. Settlers and travelers gathered. He spoke, "We owe much to Ilara and Lyra. They saved our settlement. Now they save others." He pointed to Elara and spoke, "I only did what I could." The device repeated. Alex continued, "We must honor their kindness. We name this day Unity Day. Each year we will celebrate with planting and feast." The settlers cheered. John raised his bowl. "To unity. To kindness." The settlers and travelers raised bowls of fruit wine. They drank deeply. As the night grew calm, Ilara and Lyra walked to the edge of the fields. Lyra held her mother's hand. She looked at the stars above. She said softly, "We helped many." The device translated, "We helped many." Ilara nodded. She touched Lyra's hair. She said, "We belong here now." The device repeated, "We belong here now." The stars shone bright. The fields lay quiet. Settlers rested in warm homes. Travelers slept in new beds. Ilara and Lyra felt peace. But beyond the hills, raiders still roamed. Dangers still existed. Ilara knew the work was not done. She pressed the device and spoke, "We must stay strong. We must prepare for tomorrow." The device translated. Lyra yawned and leaned against her mother. She said, "Teach me more tomorrow." The device repeated, "Teach me more tomorrow." Ilara smiled. She carried Lyra toward their small room. Night wind whispered through the gates. The settlement dreamed of green fields, full bellies, and unity in every heart. A cool breeze blew across the fields as morning light crept over the horizon. Dew clung to the leaves like tiny jewels. Settlers and travelers gathered at the gate. Everyone felt a quiet excitement. Today would be the first big harvest of the new crops. John stood at the front. He held a simple sickle and wore a leather apron. Beside him stood Ilara and Lyra. Lyra wore a small hat to shield her eyes. Ilara held the translating device against her chest. John spoke to the crowd. "Today, we gather the fruits of our work. We share with all." His voice was clear. The device clicked and spoke. "Share with all." The people cheered. They formed lines behind John. Each person carried a basket or a bag. Some held tools. Small children ran between the lines, laughing. Alex led the first row. He raised his sickle and cut golden stalks of wheat. The stalks fell in bundles. He tied them with vines. Settlers and travelers worked side by side. Ela knelt at the edge of a bean field. She picked plump pods and placed them carefully in her basket. Lyra gathered fallen leaves and handed them to her mother. She always watched her mother with bright, Eyes. Luke brought a basket of corn. He smiled at Alara and offered her a few ears. She accepted and placed them in her basket. The device translated, "Thank you." He nodded. Emma and Sarah led a group cutting vegetables. Emma said, "Careful by the root. Leave some for next time." The device repeated, "Leave some for next time." As the harvest went on, the sky grew bright and warm. Sweat dampened shirts. The work was tiring but joyful. Many stopped to rest and talk. Stories of past struggles mixed with laughter. Ben, the leader of the travelers, approached Alara. He bowed. "Thank you for giving us hope." "You changed our lives," the device translated. "We share hope." Alara smiled and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. She said, "Together we make home." The device repeated. John called out, "Let us fill the storeroom and prepare a feast." The crowd cheered. Baskets were carried to the storeroom near the center of the settlement. Inside, sacks of wheat, bags of beans, and baskets of vegetables lined the walls. The air smelled of fresh produce. Olivia and a group of cooks sorted the food. Emma and Sarah carried baskets of grain to a large mill. They poured wheat through the grinder. The mill's stones turned slowly. Flour fell into wooden troughs. In the kitchen, Emma mixed flour, water, and eggs. She kneaded dough while Sarah prepared vegetable stew and bean soup. The kitchen table groaned under bowls and pots. As midday approached, torches and lanterns were lit along the main street. Long tables were set, benches lined each side. Cloths were laid and places set with wooden bowls and spoons. John stood at the head of the main table with Alara, Lyra, Alex, and Ben. He raised his hand. The crowd fell silent. John spoke. "Today we celebrate our first harvest together. We thank each other for trust and work. May we always stand as one?" He paused. The device spoke. "Stand as one." Cheers rose. People sat. Plates filled with bread, stew, vegetables, and fresh grain porridge. Lyra clapped her hands. She sat beside her mother, sharing bread with traveling children. Alex raised a cup of fruit wine. He said, "To Alara and Lyra, our family." The device repeated, "Our family." The crowd drank and smiled. After the feast, children ran to the fields. They played hide and seek among the young plants. Alara watched them. She spoke softly into the device. "Their laughter is precious." The device translated. Ben approached John. He spoke, "We wish to join your settlement. We bring skills and new people." The device repeated, "We bring skills." John nodded. He turned to Alara and said, "What do you think?" The device and Alara said together, "Welcome all." John spoke too. The crowd, "We open our doors to new friends. We grow stronger together." The settlers cheered again. In the next days, travelers built new homes outside the original walls. They worked with settlers, sharing wood and stone. Alara showed them where to plant and where to collect water. Lyra helped children learn songs. She hummed tunes and taught them simple words from her world. The children sang and clapped, weaving melodies into the air. Life grew busy and happy. The settlement's walls expanded. Farm fields spread across the valley. Green plants stood tall and full of grain. One evening, Alex and John walked with Alara to a hill overlooking the fields. The sun set in shades of pink and orange. The fields glowed. Alex said, "We owe our lives to you. You saved us from hunger and raiders. You became our teacher and friend." The device translated, "Friend?" Alara looked at the fields and then at the humans. She spoke, "You taught me kindness. You gave me home." The device repeated. John placed a hand on her shoulder. "Home," he said. The device spoke, "Home." Under the glowing sky they stood together. Alara reached to her belt and pulled out a small seed. It was bright green. She placed it in John's hand. She said, "Plant this at the center of our field. It is from my world. It will grow strong here." The device translated. John held the seed carefully. He knelt on the soft grass and planted it in the soil beside a young tree. He covered it with earth and pressed gently. Ailey Raw, the baker's daughter, watered the spot. She said, "Grow strong." The device repeated her words, grow strong. As night fell, settlers lit lanterns along a path to the new seed. They gathered around in silence. Alex spoke. This seed will remind us of unity and hope. May it grow as... We grow together, the device translated. Ela nodded. She said, Our worlds unite in one land. The device repeated. They watched the small seed bed. The moon shone softly. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the young tree and the fresh soil. In the quiet of the night, Lyra glanced at her mother. She yawned and closed her eyes. Ilara picked her up and whispered, Rest, little one. Tomorrow we work again. The device translated. Ela carried Lyra back to their small room. She laid her daughter on a soft bed. She covered her with a warm blanket. She watched Lyra sleep. Before closing her eyes, Ilara spoke into the device. Thank you, friends. For life, for home, for family? The device repeated, For life, for home, for family. Outside, the settlement slept under the watch of stars and the new seed planted in the soil. Hope lived in every heart, and unity grew stronger with each dawn.